morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining this session on how to submit a strong application. My name is Sarah Souza, and I am the Assistant Director here in the Center for Global Engagement at Duquesne University, and I work on our international admissions side. I am very happy to be joined today by our Executive Director, Dr. Joseph DeCrosta, who will be leading this session and has tremendous experience in the field of international education and working at Duquesne. So Dr. DeCrosta, thank you so much for being with us. Would you like to add anything about your experience just as an introduction?
Well, thank you, Sarah. Yes, hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Joe DeCrosta. I head the Center for Global Engagement here at Duquesne, and I've actually been at Duquesne University for 25 years, always in the international programming area. Sometimes I can't believe that myself. So in any case, I'm really happy to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining us today. We still have some people joining as we begin, but we have a good group with us. Okay, so I've been asked today to do a presentation for all of you on how to submit a strong application. Obviously, we'll be talking more specifically about Duquesne University, but all of these principles really apply to most universities in the United States, with the exception of, certain specific requests that some universities may have. So we hope that this helps you in general, and also encourages you to consider Duquesne more seriously. So where are we? So we are located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We are on the western side of the state of Pennsylvania, really located quite right in between the East Coast and the Midwest region of the United States. We are pretty much equidistant from New York and Chicago, about a 7-hour trip to each city by car. We also are, we were known, as you may know, as a huge industrial center throughout American history in the production of steel. And now we are a center for high tech, higher education, medicine, and finance. So a very modern American city, but has the qualities, of a lot of the East Coast and Midwestern cities as well. We do have an international airport here, but most likely you would transfer from another city to get here. So we wanted to introduce you to one of our students, Aryan, who is an international student from Iran. His major is biochemistry, and he has really found a home here at Duquesne. We see him pretty often. He seems quite happy, and he's an excellent student. As you may know, it's not always easy for students to get to the States from Iran at this point, but he made it, and he's done quite well. And he was the recipient of the 2002 Western Union Global Scholars Award as well, which was not very easy to get. There were thousands of applicants from around the country. So we're proud to have students like this here at Duquesne, who are very involved in student life and excellent academically. And so this is just an example of some of the students that we have here from overseas. Aryan is actually standing on the edge of what we call the Point in Pittsburgh, where all the three rivers meet. It's quite a scenic area, as you can see, and part of our culture here in Pittsburgh. So what are the most important things to know about the application process? Obviously, we ask you to research your program, what you want to study. A lot of times people are not very clear on that, especially at the undergraduate level, and that's understandable. At the graduate level, it's another story. It's a time where we expect people to really know what their focus is and where they want to go with their undergraduate degree. But at the undergraduate level, we expect some indecision at times, but at least know that you want to be at university. It is important that you look at what the different programs are requiring in terms of admission, as well as what is expected of you while you're here at the university. So that's really important that you understand what you're applying for. It's also important to understand that you can apply as an undecided student. So say you know you want to go into business, but you don't know exactly what that major is. You can apply to undecided business. You can apply, perhaps the most general is undecided liberal arts, because it offers the most degrees and the most variety of degrees. So a lot of people will come in as undecided liberal arts as well, and then make a decision once they're here. But they know that they want a 4-year degree from an US institution, and so that's really important. But it's important to understand what a university offers, what is expected of you, and what you need to get into that institution. For example, we only have one engineering program here at Duquesne, biomedical engineering. We don't have a whole school of engineering. So if engineering is what you're interested in, and it's biomedical, great, Duquesne would work for you. But if you want a variety of exposure to different engineering fields, Duquesne might not be the right place for you. So that's what we mean about researching. Also, research your scholarship opportunities. Most universities for international students will offer scholarship opportunities. A lot of times those are evaluated upon application. And then there may be other opportunities at the same university where you're asked to apply for them separately. So just keep an eye on that. Also, there are many scholarships out there in the universe that may fit your needs and that you would have to apply to separately. So take a look at that as well. Keep in mind that scholarships for undergraduates work very differently than scholarships for graduate students. And we can talk about that a little later as well. It's important that you get really good recommendation letters for your application here to Duquesne. It's also important to ask them to speak the truth about your experience. You know, did you go through a tough spot while you were in high school and then improved? Have you always been an excellent student? All of these kinds of things. So it's just important to prepare for that and keep that in mind. We also don't want a form letter. It's important to know that, you know, some students will submit 2 recommendations and they look exactly the same. And that doesn't help us. We know that it's just a form letter and it's not well thought out. So we would ask you to, you know, ask these recommenders, be thoughtful about what they're writing and make it very personal about you. Also, prepare your personal statement. The only way we get to know you is through your grades, your interests, your recommendations, and a personal statement. And so in order for us to really holistically evaluate your application, we need you to write a little bit about yourself as well. Sometimes students don't feel super comfortable in English. That's fine. They can write their essay in their native language and ask someone for help to translate that into English so we can read it. But it is important that you understand that we need to know a little bit more about you as a student and as a person. If necessary, prepare for your tests. Now, keep in mind that the SAT, which is very well known throughout the world, that you need that to get into universities in the United States, has become what we call test optional at Duquesne. So not all programs are going, excuse me, to require SAT or ACT, if you know what that is, but some will. It depends on the program. At the graduate level, many programs will ask for the GRE or the GMAT or something of that nature, but some programs will not. So you just have to be sure of what your program is asking, read all of the information, and then decide what is best for you. If it's something that you'd rather not do, then make sure that it's not required or it's test optional. Okay. And then, of course, be a little patient and wait for your response. We work very quickly here at Duquesne, and many other universities will as well, but it takes more than a day. So we ask for your patience to evaluate the application, to understand who you are as a person, and to work with the appropriate departments if we need to. So just keep that in mind. These are things to keep in mind as you start your application process.
Dr. DeCrosta, I have a question. You mentioned undecideds for the undergraduate level. What about undecideds for the graduate level? Because I
So
do have students ask, okay, I want to change and talk about that. So can you just touch on what it's like to change programs or be undecided at the graduate level?
absolutely. So, as I had mentioned before, we really expect people to know what they want to study at the graduate level, because they're at that point in their academic career and their lives where they're starting to focus in. So, most people come in decided what they want to do at the graduate level. Sometimes it's a little confusing if, say, there's multiple fields in the sciences, right? And you've studied many of the sciences and you're not exactly sure which direction to go in. The department that is evaluating your application at the graduate level is really going to expect you to want that field of study at the graduate level. We do have students from time to time that start a graduate degree and then realize they'd like to do something else. And they ask for either a transfer to another school or to apply for another school. Usually at the graduate level, you have to reapply to that program to be reconsidered. A lot of times it is very difficult to get the credits from the previous graduate degree to apply to the new graduate degree. If it's a related degree, they sometimes will take maybe up to 6 credits, like 2 classes, to put towards your new graduate degree. But for the most part, you're not going to be able to get a lot of work. Say you're a year into your graduate degree, they probably would not be able to give you a full year. So keep that in mind. You need to be prepared at the graduate level and know really what you want to study more at that point. Okay, so this is our application portal on our website. You can find it here at apply.duq.edu/apply. And then you create an account and you begin your application process. You don't have to do it all at once. If you want to start it, put in your demographic information, upload a few things. You're still waiting on recommendations. You can upload those when they're ready. But keep in mind that we can't review your application until it is complete. We can't make a partial decision. So keep that in mind. We want you to, so if you're writing us saying, is there a decision on my application? Use the portal to know, number one, is it complete and have we received everything? And if it is, give us a couple of weeks to take a look at that. So in preparation for your application, the materials that we normally need are obviously the online application that I just talked about. An official transcript. I'll tell you what that means in a minute, but we need your grade reports from your schools. We need those different standardized tests if it is required by the program. We normally will need a language proficiency test, and we accept the TOEFL, the IELTS, and Duolingo. Those will help us understand as an undergraduate if you need any English as a second language before starting academic courses or with academic courses. And at the graduate level, number one, if you're admissible, or if you would need what's called our pathway program to help you prepare or increase your proficiency in English before being in the full academic program. The recommendation letters, as I mentioned, the essay or personal statement, and an application fee. Many of our programs do not require an application fee now, but a few may. So you just want to keep note of that, okay? What's really important, I think, about our application process, along with many other universities, is that we accept what's called the Common App or the Common Application. This is an international organization that collects student information, your demographics, your transcripts, your recommendations, everything that's needed for most schools. And then certain schools participate in this program. So you can tell the Common App that you are interested in Duquesne University and would like to send your application to us, and we will evaluate it as such. So you don't have to use our application portal. You can use the Common App at the undergraduate level for sure. The graduate programs will often ask you to apply separately for their programs using the Duquesne application, okay? The Common App doesn't require a fee either. So keep this website in mind, commonapp.org, for all of our undergraduate applicants.
Dr. DeCrosta, we have a question that kind of goes with that slide. Would the Common App be better, or our application, which gives the student more benefit?
I would say both are equally beneficial. The Common App is more beneficial for you as a person, where you can apply through one application to several universities. In terms of how we look at it, we look at the Common application and the Duquesne application the same way. We're asking for the same information, and we'll evaluate it in the same way. So it really doesn't matter. We recommend the Common App in a lot of ways because you could apply to several places at once. It's almost like a one-stop for applying to several universities. Okay, so as I mentioned, we were going to talk about official transcripts. What that means is that we want the transcript sent directly from your university. Okay, they can't come from you personally, but we will accept official scanned copies of transcripts with official stamps and signatures that you can upload to the system. Okay, but of course, we'll be checking on that to make sure that they are legitimate. Believe it or not, there are people that try to get illegitimate transcripts through the system, and of course, we can't abide by that. Okay. Recommendation, the system will allow for recommendations to be sent directly from the recommender. So essentially, with these electronic online applications, you send them a link. They click on the link, fill out the information, and it is sent directly to the university, not through you. Okay. And if you are requesting test results to be sent to our university, we'll have a code, a number code that you can use at the time of the test to have those scores sent to us. You can look up Duquesne University and have that sent to us. So be sure that that's something that you request if needed. So we mentioned the recommendations already. Like I said, we don't want template recommendations. We don't want cookie cutter, if you will, as we say in English. We don't want the same recommendation written for the same person by different people. Now, I will tell you the truth. Some professors might say to you, well, you write up the recommendation and I'll sign it. Well, that certainly is helpful to that person, but we must ask that, if you're doing that and they agreed to sign that letter, that they look different and that they talk about your different qualities. Okay. But we want someone who knows you pretty well, can talk about your academic and personal strengths. Okay. As I mentioned before, talk about student improvement. If you had a tough time for a semester or a year, why? How did you overcome that obstacle? What are some of the things you've done throughout your high school career that have set you apart from others? Are you an amazing mathematician? Have you served the local community? All of these things really help in a recommendation, okay? Sometimes we'll see that your grades are a little lower in a subject, but then you get a really strong recommendation to say, look, they did have a little bit of a hard time, but they tried really hard and they did really well in the end. And that is really helpful to us. And of course, give your recommender time to write. A lot of times people will be very busy organizing their classes, doing their jobs, writing recommendations for other students. There's a time of year in the United States, which is actually known application and recommendation season, which means that lots of teachers and advisors are being asked by tons of students to write recommendations for them, and they spend their days writing recommendations. So you have to give people time in order to create these on your behalf, okay? And like I said, don't send the same recommendation with different signatures on them. It's a red flag for us immediately. Okay, in terms of the personal statement, what sets you apart, what makes you interesting and different for us to consider you as an application. Don't just write the same essay for the same for different institutions. each institution has its own personality as well, and we're expecting you to respond to that. So, if Duquesne is a reputation of being more of ethics education, and Carnegie Mellon up the street has more of a reputation in technology education, then you need to address that in terms of your personal interests and needs. So keep that in mind. We cannot tell you how many times we have received essays that are meant for Duquesne, and then at the bottom it says, "I can't wait to join the University of Pittsburgh." That's embarrassing for the applicant and for us. So, proofread your essays and make sure they're being sent to the right places as well. Okay. One of the big red flags for us is just copying and pasting information from our website, the language that we wrote to talk to you about the university, and copy and pasting that into an essay. It's not helpful. It doesn't tell us anything about you, and it just tells us you knew how to read the website. So keep that in mind, okay? It's not a good sign for us to accept someone who's doing these things that don't make any sense as part of the application process. We take this very seriously in the United States, and by attending a session like this, obviously you want to be taken seriously as well. So we ask you not to engage in any of these practices.
Dr. DeCrosta, can you tell the students how they could use information from the website, like at the graduate and undergraduate level, like examples for, I saw like an essay the other day that was talking about internship components, so obviously students are going to look up to the website for information and it's going to influence their decision, but how can they use that information in the essay without being, copy and pasty?
Right, exactly. So for example, say, I mentioned that we have a reputation for the education of ethics, for example, right? It's infused into everything that we do here at the university. And say that's something that you're really interested in and want to apply that to your future career. Use that information off the website to expand upon it, to tell us like, I noticed that Duquesne is known for such and such. And for these reasons, it's interested me and I would like to apply in order to apply that to my degree and so and so. You see, so it's like anything in school, like you use the information to make an argument for yourself and to apply it to your own situation. And so that's what we would do in terms of using that website. As most of you probably know, we are a U.S. Catholic institution. It doesn't mean you have to be Catholic, and we're very ecumenical, which means that we welcome people from all faith traditions or no faith traditions. But it's important to know that that's an element of our philosophical standpoint on education. So if that's important to you, mentioning that and understanding that and how that would apply to you is really important. So it's not using the information verbatim, but using that information to make a case for yourself. Sarah, what about you? What are some good examples that you've seen of that?
Yeah, I think you touched on the right points for me. I think, when they're talking about any specific components of the program, it's interesting why you chose it. I mentioned that internship component. I was reading an application of a student for nursing, and they were talking about the practicum and why they liked Pittsburgh because of the healthcare system here and that practicum that the program required. So that really stands out because it shows that you took time to research, and that's what we're really trying to hit home here, is taking the time. It shows in your application, it shows you're a serious student, it shows in your recommendation letters when you have time and you don't have to do something quickly, because that's when people copy and paste, right? Or the recommendation letters just say that this student performed well, I recommend them, thank you. So that's not a recommendation letter for us that stands out.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can tell when it shows when you want to take this process seriously, and we can tell that. So, and we appreciate that. Obviously, this is the work that we do, and we want people who will be serious about coming to a well-ranked institution in the United States. So the essay, so our essay, it's actually quite general. It's very similar to the essay questions on the common application as well. But again, these are questions that we ask you, why have you chosen this program? What is it that interests you about it? How will this university in particular help you achieve your goals from what you know? I mean, obviously you're not here, you're not part of the community yet, but just from the research that you've done, why is this a good place? And what is your motivation for doing these different things, moving halfway across the world to accommodate your educational needs? So, obviously we want people who are serious about this to be part of our community. So graduate essays are actually a little more specific. They will often have a prompt to ask you to answer questions specifically about their field. So just one example in our Graduate School of Business that they ask for these different professional tracks. They want a summary often of your academic and professional background, any career endeavors that you may have had, and your motivation for pursuing a graduate degree, right? Our motto in the School of Business is the business of difference making. So what does that mean to you? It's an interesting phrase, right? But what does difference making and making a difference in the world of business, what does that mean to you? And how would you contribute to that and be a part of our community in order to make that difference? So some of them can be very specific at the graduate level. Okay, so what do
We
you
have
need?
a question, Dr. DeCrosta,
Yes.
about the word limit for graduate essays.
It's often around the same as like 250. I would say you don't want an essay to be too long. You have to keep in mind that reviewers are looking at a lot of applications, and so they want to move quickly and securely through those applications to get you an answer. So you don't want a 5-page essay. I would say anything between 1.5 to 3 pages, I think, is very acceptable. And to stay on point, answer the questions so we know what we're expecting to read and how it responds to those questions. But I would say that's a decent essay.
That's excellent advice to our students. So
Yeah,
get
and
to the
not
point.
single space 3 pages either, because that's really
Yeah,
6 pages.
right.
So do a double space kind of essay to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Okay, so what materials, we already sort of mentioned some of this. What you need for an undergraduate application for us, the application, your transcripts. We're really only looking at students who have done what's equivalent to a 2.5 GPA in our system. What's a 2.5 GPA? It's basically a B minus average that we're looking for in our system. So, very solid academic effort on your part. Okay, obviously, the higher you have, the more scholarship you will be considered for. Okay, you are not required to take the standardized tests for English, but you would, if you choose not to, you would be tested here on campus when you arrive. Most people want to know if they've met the English proficiency requirement to not take English on our campus. So they will take one of these tests. And so what we say here is for direct entry, meaning immediate academic coursework, you would need at least a 70 on the TOEFL, a 6.0 on the IELTS, or a 95 on the Duolingo. Okay, the PTE, which is the Pearson test of English, we'd ask for a 48. Okay. Or you can ask for an English waiver, but you need to explain why. In other words, if you've done 4 years of high school in English in the United States, that's a reason for us to waive the test and to not test you on campus. If you've done a part of a degree here in the United States and feel like you should be waived for English, we need to know why, and we possibly can waive you for English. Sometimes people say, well, I've studied my whole academic career from kindergarten to high school in English in another country. That often can be a rationale for waiver, but sometimes it is not, because that country's native language and language of function is not English, but you are just learning in English. So it may not be up to the university level of proficiency. So we have to use our judgment in those waivers, but you're certainly open to use those if you wish. If we can't waive your request, then we would ask you to hand in one of these tests or wait till you get to campus to take that test. And I'll talk to you a little bit now what it means to have a test score lower than that, and what you could do here at Duquesne to help you with that. And then, of course, the SAT for non-test optional programs. So for programs that are requiring the SAT, this is generally kind of the scores that we are looking for in the one evidence-based reading and writing sections, at least a 540 and above. At least one letter of recommendation and your personal statement that we recommended. SATs are not required for international students. We are test optional for all programs for international students. Okay, so keep that in mind. But if you want to take it and show your proficiency in that, you certainly can. Are there, I guess before I move on, are there any questions on the undergraduate application requirements?
So Dr. DeCrosta, just to be clear, so the student, if they don't have the English test, they could still apply.
Correct. You do not need to take any of the English. You can still apply and be accepted, but you have to expect to be tested once you are on campus to ensure that you do not need English as a second language, or if you do need English as a second language. Or, you could ask for the waiver. So it's not absolutely required, but it's a lot easier a lot of times just to take the test, see where you fall, and then know what to expect upon admission.
And then we have a question about the GPA. So at the undergraduate level, does Duquesne convert the results of your school to this 4.0 GPA?
Yes, we do. So we actually look at the grades within your system first. So how do they compare to other people, for example, that have done, say, the French system? And so we look at that very strongly. And then we'll often convert it to make it more comparable to other programs here. But it's not, it's not a perfect science. Say, for example, we're coming out at a 2.4 for somebody from their culture and their academic system. We'll look at that very closely within the academic system to see, well, is that really a 2.4 or would it be considered a little higher in our system? So that's what we mean about a holistic evaluation, right? We're not just saying, okay, 2.4, they're out. We're going to say, okay, 2.4, what else can we look at to make this possible for them? Their recommendation, their essay, the other topic, the subjects that they studied, where were their strong areas? If they took an English test, how strong are they in that? So we'll make a real consideration for that. I would say a lot of our applicants have above a 3.0. Okay, but that does not mean if you're below a 3.0 that you would not be admitted. Okay.
For the graduate level, so if you want to move to the next slide, there is a question about GPA again. So here we talk about a 3.0, and there's a question about at the graduate level being considered for scores under that. So maybe you can kind of speak more a lot about that holistic view and
Absolutely.
what the professors are looking for.
So I do think that, still at the graduate level, many of our departments look at an application holistically. However, keep in mind that graduate education is more competitive. So we're looking for higher GPAs from the university level in general, and we're looking for higher standardized test scores. Okay. Most programs will require standardized test scores like the GRE or GMAT and the English tests. Okay, but some offer special track programs for students, for example, that are pretty good English proficiency, but don't have exactly what they need, to get to that minimum of 80 on the TOEFL, for example. And so we have a list of programs we call our pathway programs that allows students to apply to that program and then within a couple of semesters complete English coursework alongside other academic coursework to get you started. So, again, research the program very closely, understand what their requirements are, and then see if, you think this is something you really want. If your English proficiency isn't reaching what they need, you can do a couple of semesters taking English courses alongside the other coursework. So yes, it is a bit more competitive. They're expecting higher grades. But at the same time, we try to look at the whole situation in regards to the student. You'll see that most graduate programs are going to ask for at least 3 recommendations, which is very important to not have duplicates because we want different perspectives on the students. And of course, a very thoughtful essay. By the time you reach graduate education, especially, your focus will be more narrow and you'll be able to speak to the specific questions that they will often ask you. And they do expect that from students at this level. So as we said, official transcripts, again, from your bachelor's degree and any other degree certificates you may have, looking for at least a 3.0. Standardized tests are required for most programs, as well as the English proficiency tests. The rationale for the English waiver, if you so wish, and then the letters of recommendation in the essay. So let's get a little more into detail about this waiver. We will seriously consider students who have recognized 4 years of high school coursework taught in English at an accredited institution. Accredited meaning that they have been recognized by the local governments or the Ministry of Higher Education and Secondary Education as an English teaching school, okay? Obviously, 4 years of an undergraduate education at a US institution for a bachelor's degree, or 2 years of graduate coursework taught in English at an accredited institution for a master's degree. So if you're going into, say, another master's or another PhD program, we'd have to see at least 2 years at that level of English, okay? As I said before, you provide a rationale. How can you prove that English was the medium of instruction? Well, we research it ourselves to make sure, but also show us, different topics, maybe, talk to us about the different subjects you have taken, what was taught in English, and the recommendation that can be stated about how your school was a full English teaching school, and so forth. And then we also research that on our own. Is this clear on your transcript or the university website? And if it is not, where can you point us that shows us that this is an English speaking school? Okay, so making it as clear as possible and basically proving your point that you were in an English, a very English, deeply English speaking school. Oh, sorry. So what's the difference between a scholarship and a fellowship? A scholarship is often based on these different criteria. Sometimes there are just need-based scholarships, meaning that they are only based on financial need. And other times they are academic or community-based scholarships. So how did you contribute to your community? How well did you do in school? Do you have a certain GPA? Do you have a certain combination of characteristics that allow you to get a scholarship of all 3 of them: financial aid, grades, and service? We also like to give students priority that are looking at more unusual majors, that they are coming from a place where we might not have a ton of students and want to attract students to our university. So all of these factors come in. And scholarships do not need to be paid back to the university or the government. It is not a loan, it is a grant. We are granting you the funds to be able to get your higher education. Fellowships, on the other hand, are often very specific, field oriented, okay? So these are, say, for example, a student would like to receive a fellowship at the graduate level, these are mostly at the graduate level, and doing an MBA, and they have a special expertise in finance, they may be awarded what we call a graduate assistantship or fellowship to be able to work with a professor side by side in research, in administration, or working for a department because of the background and expertise. Okay, so they're similar but very different. Often fellowships will be based, as I said, at the graduate level, but you will see on occasion some fellowships at the undergraduate level too, because they're based on specific needs and backgrounds for students in order to participate in those fellowships. But oftentimes your expertise is needed for receiving those fellowships.
Dr. DeCrosta, there's a question about the way that this funding shows up for the I-20. And so the student that asked this question, Mohammed, he had a pretty long one, but I'm just taking part of that question with this slide. So he's talking about fellowships and graduate assistantships offered by the school. How does that affect the immigration financial documents
All
that
right,
are required?
really good question. So we do our best to be as accurate as possible on the I-20. So when we know what you've been awarded, that is included on the I-20 along with any personal funds that you may need to show to get the total amount for the university. Because as you all know, and this is another seminar, but you need to prove that you have enough funding in order to attend this university and live in the United States in order for us to issue you the I-20, which is the immigration document that a university issues. Scholarships can be a part of that funding. Okay, so we try to be as accurate as possible, and consular officers in the embassies around the world want to see that your funding on the letter matches your funding on the I-20. Now, say, for example, you were offered a particular scholarship and then that changed, that you were giving maybe a little more money. We will do our best to update that I-20 so it matches. But you can always request that from us too, because we want to keep that as accurate possible, because that could have an effect on whether you are offered a visa. Okay, so we want to show, how much you've been offered as well, alongside your other funding, to make that happen for you. But good question. Okay. So what are our application deadlines? For most programs, not all, but I would say 90% of our programs at the university, we have what are called rolling admissions. So we admit throughout the year. The application is reviewed as it is received and completed. Once it's completed, our staff here will evaluate the application, speak to any other departments or programs if necessary at the undergraduate level. At the graduate level, those are all evaluated by each of the programs. And sometimes they are admitted on rolling admission, but it could take a little longer because they're looking at very specific things and looking at different pools of applicants. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's okay to inquire about the status of your application, but really everything can be seen on the portal as well as where you are. And if you think it's taking an extra amount of time to evaluate, let us know and we'll try to get some answers for you. But as I said, a day or two does not constitute, a reason to ask for where your application is, and even a week. I would say anything beyond 2 to 3 weeks gets a little long, and then you can start inquiring. Early decision, what that means is it's usually an early deadline in November for the next fall, okay? And it's binding, and students who apply for early decision are committing to that school. To be quite honest with you, that doesn't happen much anymore, that people want to commit to a university that early on. But some institutions will still have it. And you need to keep that in mind, okay? If you're admitted, you must attend unless the finances don't permit you to attend for some reason. Early acceptance, of course, is we're trying to get people in as soon as possible. And usually those decisions will be made by January or February, and those are not binding. And then, as I mentioned, 10% of the programs here at Duquesne would have a set deadline. So for some of our health science and pharmacy programs, for example, there may be a deadline of December 1st. And in order to be considered, you must have completed that application by that deadline. So make sure you're aware of what those deadlines are for each of the programs, if there are any. So now, having said that, we have rolling admission throughout the year, but at a certain point, we really need to cut off the applications to give the students time to get their visa applications in and approved. That's the only obstacle that we cannot control. So, as I said, rolling, but within reason. So for the summer, we start very early May for our summer session. So we're asking that things are in by April 1st. For the fall, which starts in late August, June 15th is often very helpful. And the reason why there's a longer deadline there is because we're bringing in a lot more people for the fall semester, and they all need time to be issued their letters and their I-20s in order to get their visa in time. We also have an early orientation for the fall semester, which is mid-August. So we ask you to be there by then. And then for the spring, we're looking at November 15th because we start early in January after the Christmas holiday season here in the States. So keep that in mind. Even though we're rolling, there is a certain limit to what we can admit. And then you will see that there is an application deadline for all of these other programs for the fall intake. Okay. Most of Duquesne's programs will accept students on this rolling basis, but we have to leave time, like I said, for those visas.